Hello friends, my name is Alex and welcome back to my booktube channel. I am filming this January wrap-up really late. It is coming to you in the middle of February. Honestly, because I've just been busy, I've had a lot going on and I haven't had a chance to film it, but I didn't want to skip it because I read some really awesome books in January that I'm super excited to be talking to you guys about today. So I hope that you are okay with this late wrap-up. And let's get into it. Let's talk about the 10 books that I managed to finish in the month of January. So at the beginning of the year, I set some goals for how I wanted to read this year, what types of books I wanted to choose, and some books that I was really hoping to fit into my TBR for the year. And I managed to check a couple of books off of that list, but with my reading goals, I really wanted to read books that I felt like I was going to love, because last year I read a lot of okay books and I really don't want to do that for 2023. So it's been kind of interesting because a lot of the booktubers that I watch, a lot of the videos I'm seeing are people branching out and trying to read in new genres, different things that they're not typically in their comfort zone. And that is completely the opposite of what I'm doing. I have kind of retreated into my comfort zone of fantasy, specifically young adult fantasy. I read a little bit of adult, but mostly young adult fantasy this month. And that is just where I'm comfortable, where I'm happy, where I know I'm gonna love books. So maybe later in the year, I will diversify a little bit more and try some new genres. But for now, I just wanna read books that I know I'm gonna enjoy and have a blast doing it. And I think I definitely accomplished that with my January reads. I have a lot of awesome books to talk to you guys about today, which just makes me so happy. I don't want to talk about books that I didn't enjoy on this channel. I don't want to be negative. It's not really fun to talk about books that I just thought were okay. I want to be telling you guys books that are amazing, books that I think you guys should read. So we have a lot of those to get to today. I am going to change it up a little bit in the format of how I do these videos. I used to do them in order of what I read, and this time we're going to try starting with the lowest ratings and working my way up to higher ratings. We'll see how that goes. Let me know in the comments how you prefer it. What is more interesting to you and helpful to you for finding books that you want to read? So let me know your thoughts. Also, before we get started, let me know what the best book was that you read in January or just your most recent 5-star read. I am always looking for recommendations and want to know what you guys are reading and enjoying. So let me know that down below. Now let's start off with the 2 books that I actually DNF'd. So I didn't give these ratings. I just didn't finish them at all. And the first one is Once Upon a December. Now, this one I have talked about in a reading vlog. I tried reading it around Christmas time and kind of put it down, but I carried it over into January a little bit, unsure whether I wanted to finish it. And I just decided that, you know what, Christmas is over. A Christmassy romance is not really what I'm feeling at the moment, so I put it down. Maybe I will pick it up again next Christmas, but I really wasn't vibing with the writing style. I wasn't really vibing with the characters, so I will let you know around Christmas if I'm deciding to pick it up again. But for now, this one just wasn't for me. It wasn't the mood I was in. We DNF'd this Christmassy romance for the time being. I also ended up DNFing Realm of Oblivion by, I believe her name is Mary? I'm not totally sure. Mara Good on Kindle Unlimited. This is an indie book. I was really excited to get to it. I read about 20% of it and was enjoying it. It just wasn't vibing with what I was wanting at the moment. I was reading some other books at the same time that I was way more interested in and just found that I never reached for that book. I also lost my Kindle Unlimited membership at the end of the month because I was just on a free trial. So because I wasn't reaching for it, never finished it. That one became a DNF for me as well, but that does not mean I don't recommend it. This was kind of an interesting sci-fi fantasy type YA indie debut, and I was really excited to read it, and I may pick it up and finish it later on if I end up with another Kindle Unlimited trial. But again, I'm not telling you guys this was not a good book. I didn't finish it, so I can't really tell you, but those are my 2 DNFs. Now let's get into the 10 books that I actually finished. Starting with some of my lower rated books, I will start off with a sequel that was so highly anticipated. I could not wait to read this book. I pre-ordered it. This was on my list of high priority reads for me, and that is Beasts of Ruin by Ayana Gray, the second book in the Beasts of Prey series. I believe there is one more coming. I think it's a trilogy. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is. But I was so looking forward to this because Beasts of Prey was one of my favorite reads of 2021. And this came out in 2022. I could not wait for it. I was so excited. So I picked this one up on audiobook in January. And I definitely felt like this book suffered from the second book slump. In a trilogy, this is such a common thing that happens with authors when they are writing their first series and they get to the second book and it's just kind of a drag. It's not moving as quickly, not a lot's happening. And a lot of times that's necessary in order to get to an amazing third book. So I'm still going to read the third book in this series. I'm excited about it. This was not a terrible read either. I gave this one, I think, a 3.25 stars. It was all right. I still care a lot about these characters, so that kept me engaged, but there were just some tropes used that were not my favorite. We had separation of our main characters throughout the entire book, so we were following two different storylines, completely different, because these two main characters who we had gotten to know in the first book became separated, and we were following what each of them were doing. We had a third new perspective introduced, which was actually my favorite part of this book. I really enjoyed that extra perspective that we got, which was really fun, but overall, this was just kind of a slog. Not my favorite, unfortunately. However, I will give it another go when the third book comes out because Beasts of Prey is an amazing YA fantasy. So good. So I still recommend this series. I will let you know my full thoughts on it. Once that third book comes out, I will give a full series review, but that is Beasts of Ruin. The other book that I gave 3.25 stars to was The Poison Season by Mara Rutherford. This one I did on audiobook, and I was really looking forward to this because I really enjoy the book Luminous by Mara Rutherford. I talked about that book in my underrated YA fantasy video. I thought it was such a cute book, had a lot of great themes about friendships and sisterhood as well. I really enjoyed it. However, The Poison Season was a little bit of a letdown for me after that one. I really just did not vibe with some of the tropes used here. We definitely had a case of insta-love, which is not something that I enjoy. It felt a little bit too standard YA, like a lot of other things I had read, and it just didn't stick out to me. So unfortunately, The Poison Season was not a new favorite of mine. Now, the next book I'm gonna talk about ended up getting a 3.5 stars for me. So we're moving up a little bit in this tier to A Ruinous Fate by Kaylee Smith. This is a YA fantasy debut. I see a lot of potential in this author. I was very excited to get my hands on this. It just came out in January, so this is a brand new release, debut author. I was super interested in the concept of this story. We are following a young witch who lives in this world where the magic system is dependent on these dice, these rolls of fate, they're called. And the witches have a certain number of rolls that they can do in their lifetime before their rolls are up. And these rolls kind of determine whether they end up serving the queen or whether they end up serving the fates in this epic battle war that is going to happen. And this war is going to happen once the 6th Fates warrior is chosen, and we follow a main character who is very close to becoming that Fates warrior, which is not something that she wants. She does not want to be the one who starts this epic battle between the witches and the Fates. So she is trying to prevent these roles from happening. However, it's hard for her to escape what she thinks is this dark future that she has. So she ends up going on this journey. There's a little bit of a found family. She also has an ex-boyfriend who ends up going on this journey with her along with his handsome older brother. I really enjoyed the premise of this story. I really enjoyed our main character's friends. She has 2 female roommates who end up coming on this journey with her, and that is a super fun dynamic. The romance was not my favorite. It happens very quickly. This book takes place over a short timeline, and again, that insta-love is not my favorite. You know, love triangles can be a little dicey, so those things didn't quite vibe for me. However, I really enjoyed this world and this magic system. This book also is absolutely stunning. Look at this cover. Look at this hardcover color. And then we've got this gorgeous world map here. And I just found this world to be so interesting. We have a lot of different types of fantasy creatures. We have sirens, we have witches, we have fae. ogres, lots of different things at play. So I really, really enjoyed this world, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the second book, how things start to expand, how our characters start to grow a little bit more, and how Kaylee Smith grows as an author as she continues to improve her craft. I just really see a lot of potential in the future of this series, and I'm looking forward to picking up the subsequent books when they do come out. I'm excited to continue it. However, you know, there were some issues with this. It wasn't my absolute favorite, so I did give it a 3.5. I still recommend it if that world and premise sound interesting to you. I definitely recommend giving this one a try. Always love supporting a debut author as well. So that is A Ruinous Fate by Kaylee Smith. We are going up in the world, you guys. That is already 4 of my 10 books, and we are moving up to 4 stars and 5 stars. I'm really excited because I read so many books that I just really enjoyed, had a blast with reading this month. So my first 4-star book I want to talk to you guys about is the one and only Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. House of Earth and Blood. I finally read this, you guys. I did a whole reading vlog on it. I am not Sarah J. Maas's biggest fan. I enjoy her books. Throne of Glass series I read last year. I really liked it. The ACOTAR series, not my fave, but I understand why people love it. I understand why Feyre's journey is important to a lot of people. However, just the premise of this one did not sound like it was for me. I really am not a huge urban fantasy person. I just did not think that this was gonna do it. However, I buddy read this with my friend Nicole, and I did kind of an audio tandem along with reading the physical book when I could, but primarily audio, which I think really helped with some of the world building issues that a lot of people talk about with this book. The first 200 to 400 pages are a bit of a slog with all of the world building, because this is a very complex fantasy world that we are working with here. The way that Sarah mixes all of these different kind of species of fantasy creatures in with the urban elements, there is a lot going on. It is complicated. So I definitely missed a lot of the details when reading it. However, I think that's okay. I still had a lot of fun with this. This is kind of a mystery fantasy, which is something that I'm really enjoying lately. So I think that definitely helped with my enjoyment of this. Obviously, we've got romance. That is Sarah J. Maas's staple. That was okay for me. I enjoyed the mystery and the friendships the most in this story, and I was shocked by how much I ended up crying while I was reading this book. I just really did not expect to care so much about the characters. I mean, it is quite long, so you've got a lot of time to get to know them. But by the end, I was so moved by things that were happening. Even though the first chunk of the book was a bit of a slog, I ended up giving this book 4 stars because I really enjoyed the ending. I really enjoyed some of those character relationships that started to get deeper and deeper as you went on, and I'm really looking forward to reading the second book. I plan to do so in February. We will see if I have time to get to it. But yeah, Crescent City was a surprising 4-star read for me. Next up, we have a book that should have been 5 stars. I thought the entire time I was reading it that it was going to be 5 stars until the very end. And there is one thing that happened. The very last trope that was used in this book made me so salty that I knocked it down a 1/2 star and gave it 4.5. And that book is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. You guys, I talked about this one in a reading vlog as well, and I had a blast reading this. This is by far my favorite book set in the Caraval world. I loved this so much, and if it had not ended the way that it ended, it would have gotten a full 5 stars from me because I just had so much fun. I read this super quickly because it was so light, exciting, funny, adorable, everything I wanted from this just light, fun, fluffy fantasy read. I really, really enjoyed some of the new elements that were introduced in this book. This is the second book in a trilogy. But man, that trope that she pulled out at the end just really, I'm still mad about it. I finished this like 2 weeks ago. I'm still salty about how that ended. So you guys, we will see what happens with book 3, but I am worried. I am afraid, I am nervous. I don't know what's going to happen and if I will be okay. But one of the things that I love about this new series, so the Once Upon a Broken Heart and the Ballad of Never After, is that we have moved to a land called the Magnificent North, and in this land, Stories are cursed. When people try to tell and recite stories, they can never remember how it ends. So these stories have kind of these infinite endings. Nobody knows what's the truth. And that comes into play a lot in this second book. It is very, very interesting, and I loved that element. I had so much fun trying to uncover some of these stories from the past that you can't ever quite trust what you hear because of this story curse. It was very well done. I started to like our characters a lot more in this second book and felt a lot for them. I can't even talk about it anymore because the ending brings me so much anxiety. But that is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber, 4.5 stars from me. And now we are moving on to my 5-star reads for the month. I am so excited to talk to you guys about these books that I loved so much. I had such a fantastic reading month, and I had a lot of 5-star reads. So let's get into them. First up is my very, very first read of 2023. It was 5 stars, which just made me so happy. And this was also one of the books on my list of highly anticipated reads that I was desperate to get to in 2023, a sequel to a book that I loved back in 2020, and that is Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. Now, you guys, I have heard some differing opinions on this book. Let me preface this by saying I read Legendborn back in 2020. It has been quite a while since I read that first book, so I did listen to some recaps of it, but I didn't reread it. My memory is a little iffy on the plot, the pacing, all of that. So this felt way better to me, honestly. I really, really loved this one. However, both my mom and my husband read Legendborn and then Bloodmarked back to back very recently, and they both said that they preferred Legendborn. So take that how you will. Maybe if you read them close together, you might have a different opinion than I do, but because I read Legendborn so long ago and I just remembered loving it, that's all. This one was amazing to me. It was 5 stars. I absolutely loved everything that happened in this story. Our world got a lot bigger. It's a young adult fantasy based on Arthurian legend, and the world just got so much larger. We learned so much more about the magic and how things worked. I had a blast meeting some new characters, getting to know some of the powers that were at play. I loved it. Some of the tropes that were used were some of my favorites. We had a romance blooming that I am rooting so hard for. And I just had so much fun watching Bree's journey in this story. Tracy Deonn has such powerful writing. She really has a way of explaining the Black experience in a country that still suffers from a lot of the effects of slavery. So there are some really heavy topics discussed in this, but they're made so real, and it's really eye-opening and just a really wonderful way to learn and become more aware of how you are as a human and how you treat other people. I just think it is so important. Not only that, but there's also exploring topics of grief and how to help friends who are grieving. Good ways to do that and bad ways to do that. There are just so many really, really beautiful ways that Tracy Deonn touches on real life experiences that are so important to be discussed. I think this is such an important young adult series, and I highly, highly recommend it. Honestly, when my husband told me that he didn't love it, I was ready to fight. I was so angry with him at first. We had some good conversations about it later, but at first I was ready to throw down because I love this book. I adore this book. Please, please, please read these books. Okay, I told you we were going in order of star rating, but I kind of lied because this next one that I want to talk about is an entire trilogy. And instead of breaking it up by the one book that I gave 4 stars and then talking about the 5-star ones later, I wanted to talk about the trilogy as a whole. And that is Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. So these books were actually all rereads for me. I read this trilogy, The Infernal Devices, when it came out when I was in high school, and I was obsessed. I'm a huge Cassandra Clare fan. I was when I was young, and I haven't read her books since I was in high school. But with The Last Hours trilogy coming to a close this month, I really wanted to reread The Infernal Devices because The Last Hour sounded really interesting to me, but it follows characters that are children of characters that we meet in The Infernal Devices, and I did not remember these books that I read 10 years ago. So On a whim, I picked up Clockwork Angel on audiobook. I read these all on audiobook. I own the physical copies, so I'm showing them to you, but I read them on audio. I picked this up on a whim and ended up listening to it in a day because I was obsessed. I loved it. Honestly, I can't even remember why I gave this 4 or 4.5 stars. Maybe it should just be a 5 stars because this series is so interesting. We are following a young woman named Tessa Gray who ends up moving to England to live with her brother. We are in Victorian times in London. When she arrives, she is actually kidnapped and taken away by these women who tell her that she's actually a shapeshifter and they're trying to force her to learn how to use her powers. Now, these are not spoilers. This all happens in like the first chapter. Then Tessa is rescued from these women by a group of shadow hunters, kind of accidentally, and ends up falling in with them. Shadow hunters are warriors who are descended from angels and they battle demons. Shadowhunter Chronicles follow a bunch of different groups of shadow hunters across the world. These ones happen to be set in London and the London ones are my favorite so far. I've not read the Dark Artifices yet, so we'll see once I get to that trilogy, but The Infernal Devices is definitely near and dear to my heart. I loved these when they first came out, and the reread was so much fun. So Clockwork Angel, I gave a 4 stars. It could be a 5. It's really good. Clockwork Prince, the second one, I also ended up listening to in a day. Utter perfection. 5 stars. Amazing. A million. The friendships that Cassandra Clare writes are my favorite thing ever. A lot of people talk about her romances. I'm here for the friendships. Will and Jem's friendship kills me. It's so good. And then the third and final book, Clockwork Princess, brought me to tears. I was sobbing listening to this. It just destroyed me, gutted me, rips your heart out, but it's in the best way. So good. Also 5 stars. I just adore these characters. I adore them. They're lovely. I had so much fun rereading these. This one I couldn't get on audiobook right away, and the days between reading Clockwork Prince and this one, I checked the Libby app like 100 times a day because I was so desperate for my hold to come in on this book. I wanted to read it so badly. So when it finally came in, obviously I binged it. I'm obsessed. I'm in love. These are so good. I will definitely read this series again someday. And if you've never read The Infernal Devices, this is your sign. Do it now. And all of that culminated in the 10th book that I read this month, that I also gave 5 stars. And that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. The first book in the Last Hours trilogy. I made it. I binged through The Infernal Devices and made it to the Last Hours, and the first book got read in January. Spoiler alert, I have now finished the second and third book, which you will get reviews on in my February wrap-up, but Chain of Gold was amazing. I loved it so much. In this story, we are actually in the turn of the century, early 1900s, in Edwardian London, and we are following the children of a lot of the characters from The Infernal Devices. So we do get cameos from our characters that we love from The Infernal Devices, but we also get our new characters, their children. And I love these characters so much. Cassandra Clare, obviously it's been 10 years. She's grown a lot as a writer. And even though The Infernal Devices are amazing and I love the characters in those books, these ones are equally or better. They're just so well done. And again, it is the friendships that just rip my heart out of these books. They are so beautiful. Particularly, I love the friendship between Cordelia and Lucy in this book, and Matthew and James, and also their entire friend group, the Merry Thieves. They just have my heart, and I will talk a little bit more about that when I tell you about the other books in my February wrap-up, but the first book in the trilogy is so good, so I highly recommend picking up The Infernal Devices and then The Last Hours if you are at all interested in Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter Chronicles. So that is it. We have made it through the books that I read in January. So many 4- and 5-star reads. It was such a wonderful month. And as you can see, I fully fell into fantasy. I think every single one of those books was fantasy, except for my romance DNF. And that is where I'm comfortable. That is where I'm happy. And you know what? It's okay to read in your comfort zone sometimes. So I hope that you enjoyed this wrap up. Hopefully you found some books to add to your TBR. If any of these sounded interesting, let me know which ones you have read in the comments down below, or like I said earlier, the best book that you've read recently. I would love to chat with you, and I will talk to you all in my next video. Bye!